Hey guys, welcome back to Mountaintop 9, and in this video I want to talk about Killjoy of Necrophagia. Yesterday I found out that he passed away, and you know, I was pretty saddened by that news because he was a big influence on me personally when I was really getting into more obscure horror films. And how that happened is, I remember I had a subscription to Metal Maniacs, and there was an article about Necrophagia in it. And I had heard about them and read the name here and there, but I hadn't yet got into them. And the thing that really struck me about Killjoy was he was different than other death metal and black metal musicians in the sense that he genuinely was into horror films. And when I say that, I don't mean he was just into the mainstream stuff, the stuff that everyone knows. No, this guy was a horror freak. He knew about everything. He was very knowledgeable on the subject inside and out, and that set him apart from other metal musicians in my mind. You know, the only one off the top of my head, the only other person off the top of my head is Will Romer of Mortician. He's a really knowledgeable guy about horror films as well. But, you know, I remember that article in, it was probably in 97, 98. It was right around the time that Holocausto de la Muerte was coming out. And they did an interview with Killjoy in it. And it just really impressed me off the bat. I know he mentioned The Changeling in there. He probably mentioned Let's Scare Jessica to Death and Don't Be Afraid of the Dark. You know, classic stuff that other musicians would never mention in a million years. And then I remember I was just so impressed by the scope of what Killjoy said in that interview, just all of the different references he was making. And then, so I got that album, Holocausto de la Muerte. I also ended up grabbing Season of the Dead, the debut album from Necrophagia that was put out in the 80s. And then, not long after reading that interview, I remember getting on the Necrophagia official website, and there was a special section on there called Recommended Horror. And what was so cool about it was the recommendations on there were just stellar. I mean, he had all the Fulci classics. He had The Gates of Hell on there, House by the Cemetery, The Beyond, Zombie, New York Ripper. But then he also had gritty, low-budget type stuff like Don't Go in the House, Nightmare, you know, and then really obscure shit like Deadline from Mario as a Party. It's a Canadian film from the early 80s, and it is just so shocking and depressing. It's just filled with these really twisted gore scenes. I actually did a review for that movie, Deadline. And if you watch my review for that film, you'll see that I talk about how Killjoy was a big influence on me seeking that movie out. So he just had all of these cool recommendations, stuff that I hadn't yet checked out. You know, quite a few of the movies on his list I was already aware of, but there were some recommendations on there that were just totally out of left field. I mean, it was a great list. I mean, like I said, he had the Fulci movies on there, he had the Argento classics, but then he also had stuff like The Grim Reaper, aka Anthropophagus, you know, the Joe D'Amato movie, he had Buried Alive, Luther the Geek, and just all kinds of shit. Dead and Buried, it was just so great. And I just remember thinking, man, this guy really gets it. It's not just, you know, if you would look at an interview with some other random death metal person, you know, if they were asked in an interview about, hey, what's your favorite horror movie? They'd probably go, I really liked that Friday the 13th movie. That was pretty damn cool. You know, that was about the extent, about the breadth of most metal musicians' knowledge of horror. So Killjoy just really impressed me. It was just such a big influence, like I said, on seeking out other movies in a similar vein, because I got his taste. I understood it. I understood when he would talk in interviews about a 70s film like Let's Scare Jessica to Death or Don't Be Afraid of the Dark. I understood what he meant when he talked about stuff like Whispering Voices. You know, Killjoy said one of the things that he thought was the creepiest in older horror movies is when there'd be whispering voices calling out from the darkness, you know, stuff like that. He said that really was something that he felt was very effective, and I agree wholeheartedly with that. You know, he understood atmosphere. He understood that was the most important thing. You know, his mantra was gore forever and stuff like that, and he loved Fulci and everything, but he understood you also had to have atmosphere. You wanted to get under people's skin and give them the creeps. So he knew what he was talking about when it came to horror films. And so going back a little bit, just touching on the music a bit, one thing I really liked about Season of the Dead was his vocal approach on that album, because, you know, he said that what he wanted to sound like, a big influence on him was just sounding like Reagan from The Exorcist, okay? And so the vocal style on Season of the Dead was quite different from what it later became on stuff like Holocausto and everything that came later. That stuff on Holocausto and later kind of reminded me of Maniac from Mayhem. It was a similar style, you know what I mean? But on Season of the Dead, he had more of this spoken word, but a possessed spoken word style. And I thought it was really cool, and I thought it went well with the music. And, you know, my favorite song on Season of the Dead is Beyond and Back. Man, put that song on, Beyond and Back. It has such a great atmosphere. It's very otherworldly, it's very creepy, and that song really gets under your skin. And just the theme of the song about someone committing and going on to the other side. There's this really cool middle section in there with acoustic guitar, and then you've got some electric guitar leads over it, and it's just playing in such a melancholy, creepy way. I just really love that tune, Beyond and Back. And then the very end of it with the choir of voices, it just sounds like this choir of dead souls. Great stuff, and it definitely fits the horror atmosphere that Killjoy was so fond of. And there's some other cool songs on Season of the Dead, you know, like Mental Decay and everything. There's just some cool riffs on there. And I like the opening song too. I like the acoustic intro on that. So there's some good atmosphere on Season of the Dead. But the album that I spent the most time listening to when I first got into Necrophagia was definitely Holocausto de la Muerte. From the opening song, Blood Freak, and then Embalmed Yet I Breathe, and then Burning Moon Sickness. All of that stuff, I played it a lot. And you know, Phil Anselmo, the music that he wrote for that album and his style of playing, it was very different from Season of the Dead. Here on Holocausto, we have a very sludgy guitar. You know, there's some punk influence on there. It's very raw, the playing, and I really like it. I enjoy that fucking album a lot. The feedback on it, just the raw sound of Phil's guitar on there is really cool. It's not like other like death metal albums. I think Holocausto stands on its own, really. Just the sickening atmosphere that's created on songs like Cadaverous Screams of My Deceased Lover, and like I said earlier, Burning Moon Sickness. That is some great stuff, man. It really gets under your skin, and when you couple it with the videos they made, if you watch that Through Eyes of the Dead video that Jim Van Bebber, you know, he directed the videos on there. There's some sick stuff, like, you know, in Blood Freak. They were just going for a totally over-the-top approach. You know, they got the guy, he's taking the girl and peeling skin off her face. It's really sick, twisted shit. I really love the video for Burning Moon Sickness, because what they did is they combined footage from Jim Van Bebber's The Last Days of John Martin. You know, that's the one where the guy's got the girl in a fucking cage over a stove, and then he's chopping up her boyfriend right in front of her. I mean, just chopping off his goddamn head and everything, and then he's walking up to her and just peering in at her with this bloody face. It's really sickening, and it goes very well with the music. That song, Burning Moon Sickness, perfectly accentuates what's going on screen. You know, with this guy just being dismembered, and then the girl in the cage. It's very twisted stuff. You know, I love that title, Burning Moon Sickness, because it makes you think of the Olaf Ittenbach movie, The Burning Moon. You know, so Killjoy would throw in all these references to stuff. I mean, there were Children Shouldn't Play with Dead Things references on that album, with stuff at the beginning of Embalmed Yet I Breathe. There was stuff that was in tribute to Hellraiser on Children of the Vortex. And yeah, just some really cool stuff. I think there's even some Exorcist 3 references thrown in on that album. Just all kinds of cool stuff. So I really like that. Really like the raw, sludgy atmosphere of that album. And another thing I want to say is that during this time in the late 90s, I also would get, I forget if it was on the Necrophagia website or something, but there was an email address where you could email Killjoy. And I would send him emails asking him about movies, you know, that weren't on the list, okay? You know me, one of my favorite films of all time is Mountaintop Motel Massacre. And I knew right away, before I even sent the message asking him, I thought to myself, if anyone got that movie's atmosphere or appreciated it besides me, it would have to be Killjoy. I already know that Will Romer of Mortician, he loves the fucking movie. So I figured Killjoy would as well. So I emailed Killjoy and, you know, asked him, I said, hey, what do you think about the movie Mountaintop Motel? He wrote me back like a day or so later saying how, yeah, man, it's a very underrated movie, very creepy shit. And man, that made my day. That was like the first time I had ever corresponded with him, and he wrote me back pretty quickly thereafter. And, you know, I have trouble sometimes because I'm so busy editing and making videos. I have problems sometimes, you know, responding to comments on my own YouTube channel. And I'm sure he got way more emails than I get YouTube comments. So what I'm saying is just the fact that he responded so quickly. I mean, that really made my day that day. And the fact that I just knew it. I knew that he probably appreciated that film, and sure enough he did. He said that movie is underrated. He said it's very creepy, and so I like that. And then we talk about movies like Ghost House, and of course we talk about Nightmare. Like for instance, he wrote in one of the emails he sent me, he was like, yeah, Nightmare has one of the sickest decapitation scenes ever, and this and that. So I liked talking to him about my favorites, you know. And then also I used to go to Cinema Wasteland quite a bit. Back like in the early and mid 2000s, I would go there on a somewhat semi-regular basis. And, you know, I especially loved in the mid 2000s, one of the big things I loved about going to a convention like Cinema Wasteland is I just loved to go and get drunk. It was just an excuse to fucking drink and, you know, maybe bump into some people and talk about horror movies. So that was the big thing, the big draw for me about Cinema Wasteland. And there was one time, and I saw Killjoy a few different times. And, you know, it was one of those things where I don't like to bother people that I don't really know. I don't like to just go up and insert myself in a situation and act like I'm someone's best friend if I don't know them. So, you know, I was a fan of Killjoy. So I looked at him, if I saw him at a place like Cinema Wasteland, I would look at him with reverence, you know what I mean? So I would never really go up and bother him. I only did it like, only once or twice did I go up and say something to him. And I still remember the one time it was at a Cinema Wasteland in October, I want to say it was in October of 2005. That's when it was. It was right before, because I know it was before 2006. It was in the lobby there at the Holiday Inn, and it was probably about midnight, 1 in the morning. I had been drinking for a while, and he was sitting on a couch by the sliding doors, and I was about to go out and have my last cigarette of the night and go back over to my hotel room. Killjoy happened to just be sitting by himself for a minute. I don't know why. Usually he always had at least someone with him, but he was sitting on a couch there as I was going out, and I stopped and talked to him for a minute. Very cool guy. He was real nice to me, and I think I probably said something to him about how much I appreciated his recommended horror list, because it helped round out my tastes, so to speak. It helped me seek out things. I mean, because there were things on there like Aftermath. You know, I didn't know what the fuck Aftermath was at that time in the late 90s. I'd never heard of it. So it helped me seek out these fucking twisted things I hadn't even yet heard of. And here's another thing I want to show real quick. If you've never heard this, you should seek it out. It's Killjoy, Compelled by Fear. Okay? And this is like a solo thing that he put out. And man, look at that cover. Isn't that cool? You know what the cover reminds me of? It reminds me of the cover to Scream Time. That was a movie that was put out on Lightning Video, VHS. I think you can get it on DVD now, probably from Troma or something. But the VHS, okay, from Lightning Video had this girl screaming, like looking out a window, and it looks a lot like this. This cover reminds me a lot of Scream Time. That is just such a cool cover, so I wanted to show that off. I don't even know how many they made of this. This is it says on the back here, numbered edition 726. I mean, did the record label New Renaissance put out 1,000 of these? I'm not sure. But anyway, if you've never heard this, you should pick this up also. You know, Killjoy was involved in a lot of different things. But yeah, man, it was just really sad news yesterday to learn that Killjoy passed away. He was a great, great, cool guy, and big influence with the horror film type stuff, you know, because he understood. He got it. He wasn't one of these guys, like I said earlier, oh, Friday the 13th is pretty cool. I'm really into horror films. I love those movies, you know, Jason and Chucky and blah, blah, blah. No, he got it. He talked about movies like Children Shouldn't Play with Dead Things and Deranged. I mean, there probably wasn't a horror film you could mention to Killjoy that he wasn't aware of. So that's about it for this video, guys. I really appreciate you watching. Killjoy was a very important person to me as far as his influence on horror and, you know, the music that he created, and he'll always be remembered. So thanks again, guys. I'll see you again next time.